My hand trembled, the thick envelope feeling impossibly heavy, its official-looking print swimming before my eyes. Certain words leaped out, cold and brutal: petition, incapacity, financial oversight. Then the names of the petitioners. Mark, Lisa, our children. The air I just drawn into my lungs seemed to freeze there. They were trying to have us declared legally incompetent. My wife, Sarah, was in the kitchen, the familiar scent of her baking bread suddenly feeling like a memory from another lifetime. They wanted our farm, our home, everything. My voice, when I finally found it, was a strangled whisper. Sarah, they're trying to take it all. Our own kids. The words hung in the air, a death knell for the life we knew. My name is Tom. I'm a farmer born and bred on Willow Creek Farm, just like my father and his father before him. This land isn't just dirt and crops to me and Sarah, it's our legacy, our sanctuary. Every fence post, every furrow in the fields holds a piece of our story. Sarah, she was a city lawyer when I met her, sharp as a tack, but she fell for the rhythm of this life as hard as she fell for me. We raised Mark and Lisa here, taught them about honest work, about the beauty of a dawn breaking over dew-kissed fields, and the deep satisfaction of a harvest safely gathered. We thought we taught them about loyalty, about family. We were so wrong. Sarah, bless her, never fully hung up her legal mind. Even with the endless demands of the farm and raising 2 kids, she found time to mentor young law students. She had a soft spot for those from tough backgrounds, kids with brains and ambition but no connections, no silver spoon. She'd spend hours guiding them, offering advice, sometimes just listening. I always admired her for that, her quiet generosity. It was just part of who she was. Our life was simple, but it was good. Full of hard work, yes, but also full of love and the kind of peace money can't buy. We figured we had it all mapped out, a quiet retirement on the land we cherished, eventually passing it on. We never saw the storm gathering on the horizon. The first signs were small, insidious. Mark and Lisa, who both lived in the city and usually only graced us with their presence for Christmas and Thanksgiving, started showing up more often. Weekend visits, unannounced. At first Sarah and I were thrilled. We'd make their favorite meals, fuss over them. But their conversations, they began to take a strange turn. Mark would watch me mending a fence and say something like, "Dad, are you sure you should be doing that kind of heavy lifting at your age?" His brow would be furrowed with what I, like a fool, mistook for concern. Lisa would pipe up, her voice dripping with false sweetness, telling Sarah she looked tired, asking if she was remembering to take her vitamins, maybe they should help her organize them. They'd steer every conversation towards the farm's finances, our wills, our long-term care plans. Always with a casual air, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Just thinking ahead, Dad," Mark would say, that unsettlingly bright smile plastered on his face. "We want to make sure you're both taken care of." That phrase, taken care of, began to feel less like comfort and more like a threat. Sarah noticed it too. I'd see a flicker in her eyes, a slight tightening of her lips when they'd start in on us. I tried to brush it off, telling her they were just worried. I wanted to believe it. I desperately wanted to believe our children weren't something else. But a cold knot of unease began to tighten in my chest after every visit. What were they really up to? The pressure intensified, slow and steady, like a creeping vine. One Saturday, Mark arrived with a glossy stack of brochures. Assisted living facilities. "Just some information, Dad," he'd said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "No harm in looking, right? For the future." I remember gripping my coffee mug so hard I thought the porcelain might crack. I told him, my voice tight, that his mother and I were perfectly fine right where we were, that this farm was our future. He just shrugged, a brief, dismissive gesture that spoke volumes. Then Lisa called, her tone light, almost breezy, suggesting we grant them power of attorney. "It would just make things easier, Mom," she cooed, if anything ever happened. "So Mark and I could handle bills and things without bothering you." Sarah, ever composed, politely but firmly declined, reminding Lisa that we were perfectly capable and had our own lawyer for such matters. The silence that followed on Lisa's end of the line was heavy, chilling. After that, the visits and calls became less frequent, but a new, more sinister campaign began. My cousin called, asking if Sarah was feeling okay, mentioning that Lisa had expressed some serious concerns about her memory. Our neighbor, old Bill, asked me if the farm work was getting to be too much, said Mark had dropped by and mentioned I was struggling, slowing down considerably. They were poisoning the well, painting us as feeble and fading to anyone who would listen. And then the small, unsettling incident started. My favorite wrench, the one I'd had for 30 years, vanished from its hook in the workshop. Sarah's reading glasses, always on her nightstand, disappeared for days, only to turn up in the fruit bowl. Tiny things easily chalked up to the forgetfulness of age. But they were happening too often. I'd find myself pausing, a flicker of genuine panic, wondering if maybe they were right. Was I losing my mind? Sarah, thankfully, was a rock. "Don't you let them get to you, Tom," she'd said one evening, her hand firm on mine. "This is a game. They're trying to make us doubt ourselves, to make us their version of old and incapable." But the seed of fear they'd planted was taking root, watered by the constant nagging suspicion that our own children were behind this slow erosion of our peace. The situation exploded one crisp Tuesday morning. An unfamiliar sedan crunched up our gravel driveway. A woman emerged, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase. She introduced herself as Dr. Evans, a geriatric specialist. She said Mark had contacted her, expressing deep concerns about our well-being, and had asked her to stop by for an informal chat. An informal chat. My blood turned to ice. Mark hadn't breathed a word of this. Sarah and I exchanged a wide-eyed look. We were ambushed. We maintained our composure, answered her questions politely, but the entire chat felt like a carefully orchestrated interrogation. She probed about our memory, our daily routines, our ability to manage finances, our medications. Her tone was professionally sympathetic, but her questions were leading, designed to elicit answers that would fit a predetermined narrative of decline. I could feel the invisible walls closing in. I was seething inside, the betrayal a raw, burning wound. After Dr. Evans departed, a heavy, suffocating silence filled our old farmhouse. The thin veneer of familial concern had been stripped away, revealing the ugly truth beneath. This was no longer about subtle manipulations, this was an overt attack. That night, sleep was impossible. I paced the kitchen. The image of Dr. Evans's sympathetic yet judgmental face burned into my mind. Mark and Lisa's feigned worry, their carefully crafted lies. I had to confront them. I tried calling Mark. Voicemail. Lisa. Same thing. Frustration gnawed at me. Our old rotary phone sat on the kitchen counter, a relic we rarely used. On a desperate hunch, I picked it up. And then I heard them. Voices. Mark and Lisa. They must have been on a three-way call, perhaps trying to reach us earlier, and hadn't disconnected properly. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood there, frozen, barely breathing as their words, clear and sharp, filled the earpiece. Lisa was saying Dr. Evans completely bought their story. She said the doctor noted we showed classic signs of early cognitive decline, especially Dad with his supposed confusion about the farm finances. My confusion. It was a lie built on their twisted interpretations. Good. Mark's voice cut in sharp and greedy. The lawyer said that report will be dynamite. We need to get the farm appraised immediately. Once we have conservatorship, we argue it's too much for them, that it's in their best interest to sell. Think of the payout, lease. We'll finally be set. Sell Willow Creek. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. My hand was shaking so violently I could barely hang up the phone. Sarah found me slumped at the kitchen table, my face ashen. I told her everything I'd heard. The raw devastation in her eyes mirrored my own. Our children. Our flesh and blood. Plotting to strip us of our home, our dignity, all for money. The next morning, the first call we made was to Ben, our lawyer and old friend. We knew then this was war. The arrival of the official summons, though expected, still felt like a punch to the gut. Seeing our supposed incompetence laid out in cold legal jargon, with Mark and Lisa's names as petitioners, it was a fresh wave of grief mixed with a burning rage. Ben was incensed on our behalf, but he was also a realist. They've built a case, Tom, Sarah, he said, his brow furrowed as he scanned the documents their high-priced lawyer had filed. It's based on that quack doctor's report and a load of manufactured concerns, but in court, anything can happen. We need to be airtight. The days that followed were a nightmare of meetings, gathering financial statements, character references from friends and neighbors who knew us, knew our capabilities. It was deeply humiliating, having to prove we weren't senile, that we weren't a burden. Each document felt like another paper cut, small but stinging. Sarah, though I knew her heart was breaking, threw herself into the preparations with a steely resolve I hadn't seen in years. not since her days arguing cases in court. Her legal mind, sharp as ever, dissected every line of their petition. One evening, she was hunched over the court filings at the kitchen table, the overhead light casting long shadows. Suddenly she let out a small, sharp gasp. "Tom, look," she whispered, her voice trembling, pointing to a name at the bottom of a procedural notice. "Presiding Judge Ramirez." My stomach clenched. Another faceless official who would decide our fate based on the lies our children were peddling. "What about her?" I asked, trying to keep the despair from my voice. Sarah looked up, and for the first time in weeks, a strange, almost incredulous light flickered in her eyes. "Elena Ramirez," she said slowly, as if tasting the name. I think I knew an Elena Ramirez. Years ago. A law student. I mentored her. My jaw nearly dropped. One of the students she'd poured her heart into helping? What were the odds? "Are you absolutely sure, Sarah?" I pressed. She nodded, a distant, thoughtful look on her face. "Yes, I'm almost certain." She was brilliant, truly gifted, but she was struggling. Came from a very difficult background, almost no support system. She was on the verge of dropping out of law school. I spent a lot of time with her, guiding her, helping her find resources, just believing in her. She was so incredibly grateful. A tiny, wistful smile touched Sarah's lips. "I haven't heard from her in years. I'd almost forgotten. But if this is the same Elena..." The unspoken possibility hung in the air between us. It wasn't a guarantee, not by a long shot. Judges are bound by impartiality. But it was a spark. A tiny, improbable spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a sliver of something other than pure dread. Maybe, just maybe, fate had dealt us an unexpected hand. The courtroom was exactly as I'd imagined. Cold, imposing, all polished wood and solemn faces. Mark and Lisa sat with their lawyer, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of somber concern. The sheer audacity of their performance made my blood boil. Mark actually caught my eye and gave a tiny, pitying shake of his head, as if we were the deluded ones. I squeezed Sarah's hand. She squeezed back, her grip surprisingly strong. Then the bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise." Judge Elena Ramirez entered. She was younger than I expected, poised, her expression unreadable as she settled onto the bench. I scanned her face for any sign of recognition as her gaze swept the room, but there was nothing. My fragile hope faltered. Mark and Lisa's lawyer launched into his presentation. It was a masterfully crafted narrative of our supposed decline, painting us as confused, incapable, a danger to ourselves and our valuable assets. Dr. Evans took the stand, spewing medical jargon that twisted every normal sign of aging into a symptom of profound incompetence. She spoke of my alleged disorientation regarding complex financial matters, a direct echo of the lies from that overheard phone call, and Sarah's supposed memory lapses, no doubt referencing the strategically misplaced items. Listening to them systematically tear apart our lives, our very identities, was torture. I saw Sarah flinch when Lisa, her voice thick with feigned emotion, testified about how deeply worried she was, how she only wanted what was best for us. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, ripped open anew in this public, humiliating arena. Then it was Ben's turn. He was calm, methodical. He presented our financial records, all meticulously organized. He submitted a report from our own trusted physician, stating unequivocally that we were both in excellent mental and physical health. He called friends, neighbors, even the head of the local farmers' co-op, all of whom testified to our sharp minds, our active involvement in the community, and our continued hard work on the farm. Finally, Sarah rose to speak. She stood tall, her voice clear and steady as she addressed Judge Ramirez. She spoke of our love for Willow Creek, of the generations of our family who had poured their lives into it. She spoke of her own career as a lawyer, of her deeply held belief in justice and ethical conduct. Then her voice softened just a fraction. "Your Honor," she said, her gaze fixed on the judge, "I have always believed in the profound impact of mentorship. Years ago, I had the distinct privilege of guiding a young, exceptionally bright law student. And Elena. She faced tremendous personal and financial obstacles, but her intellect and her tenacity were truly remarkable. I remember telling her that integrity and gratitude were not just the cornerstones of a successful legal career, but of a life well lived. I saw it then. A subtle shift in Judge Ramirez's posture. Her eyes, which had been professionally distant, now held a new intense focus as they rested on Sarah. A flicker of something crossed her features. Recognition? Surprise? It was fleeting, but it was there. Sarah continued, her voice ringing with quiet conviction. I taught her that the law, at its best, is a shield for the vulnerable, but it must never, ever be wielded as a sword for greed or personal gain. Judge Ramirez leaned forward, her attention unwavering. When Ben concluded his arguments, the judge turned her gaze to Mark and Lisa. Her questioning, which had been standard and impartial with our witnesses, now became sharp, incisive. Mr. Thompson, she addressed Mark, you assert your father is confused about financial matters. Can you provide this court with a single verifiable instance of a significant financial misstep on his part? Mark stammered, vaguely mentioning general disorganization. The judge pressed him. General disorganization, Mr. Thompson, or simply a disagreement with your father's financial decisions which, perhaps, do not directly benefit you? Mark's face turned a dull red. She then turned to Lisa. Miss Thompson, you spoke with such concern about your mother's memory lapses. Were these lapses formally diagnosed by a medical professional, or are they based on your personal interpretations of, for example, occasionally misplaced reading glasses? Lisa squirmed under the judge's unblinking stare. It was like watching a skilled surgeon dissect their flimsy, self-serving lies. Finally, Judge Ramirez leaned back in her chair. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, thick with anticipation. This court has heard the testimony, she began, her voice clear and resonant. It has meticulously reviewed all evidence presented by both petitioners and respondents. The petition for conservatorship is sought on the grounds of alleged incapacity. She paused, her eyes sweeping over Mark and Lisa, then coming to rest on Sarah and me. Frankly, she continued, her tone now laced with an unmistakable and icy disapproval that made our children visibly shrink in their seats. The evidence presented by the petitioners is not only weak and speculative, it appears to be overwhelmingly motivated by self-interest rather than any genuine concern for the well-being of their parents. She commended Ben for his thorough and compelling defense of our competency. Then, looking directly at Mark and Lisa, her voice like steel, she delivered the words we had prayed for. The petition is denied. Unequivocally. Lisa let out a small, choked gasp. Mark stared, slack-jawed. Judge Ramirez wasn't finished. Furthermore, she added, her voice sharp, this court finds the petitioners' attempt to manipulate the legal process and pathologize their parents for personal financial gain to be deeply disturbing. This court takes this opportunity to remind you that filial duty, respect, and basic human decency are not mere suggestions. They are the very bedrock of a civilized society. She brought her gavel down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Court adjourned. The sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. We had won. Sarah's long-ago act of kindness, her unwavering belief in a struggling student, had come back to us, a shield against the unimaginable. The relief that washed over me was so profound my knees nearly buckled. As we slowly made our way out of the courtroom, Mark and Lisa stood frozen, their faces a mask of disbelief, fury, and public humiliation. They didn't look at us. Their lawyer was already stuffing papers into his briefcase, his expression one of grim defeat. There were no apologies, no glances of remorse. Just the stark, ugly reality of their failed greed. Ben clapped me on the shoulder, a triumphant grin splitting his face. Justice Tom, he boomed. Pure and simple. Sarah was quiet, but her eyes shone with unshed tears, tears of vindication I knew, but also, I suspected, tears of a deep maternal sorrow for the children she had truly lost that day. In the weeks that followed, the silence from Mark and Lisa was absolute. No calls, no texts, no hollow attempts at reconciliation. It was as if a vast, unbridgeable chasm had opened between us, a chasm they had dug with their own hands. We didn't reach out either. What was there left to say? The trust, the very foundation of our family, had been shattered beyond repair. We focused on healing, on slowly, carefully, reclaiming the peace they had tried so viciously to steal. Willow Creek Farm, our beautiful, resilient farm, felt more precious, more sacred than ever. Every sunrise we watched paint the sky over our fields, every familiar chore completed, was a quiet affirmation of our victory. Sarah and I talked for hours, nights on end. We grieved for the relationship we thought we had, for the children we thought we knew. But through that grief, we found a renewed strength in our bond, a deeper appreciation for each other. We had faced the ultimate betrayal and we had not only survived, but we had prevailed together. We did hear eventually through a discreet inquiry Ben made, that Judge Elena Ramirez had indeed been the young woman Sarah had mentored all those years ago. Apparently, she had privately acknowledged to a colleague after the ruling that she remembered Sarah's guidance vividly, and with profound gratitude. Of course, her decision was based strictly on the law and the evidence or lack thereof. But knowing that connection existed, that Sarah's past act of selfless kindness had, in some beautifully karmic way, circled back to protect us in our darkest hour, brought a sense of profound, almost poetic justice. Life on the farm slowly returned to its familiar, comforting rhythm. The shadows of doubt and fear finally receded. We had learned a brutal lesson about the fragility of trust, even within the closest of families. But we had also learned about our own resilience, about the enduring power of integrity, and the unexpected, wonderful ways that goodness can echo through the years, returning when you need it most. We had not just saved our farm, we had reclaimed our lives, our dignity and our peace.